My name is Robert Castillo, and nothing in my life had prepared me for the moment my father-in-law handed me a thick envelope, stamped with the court seal, as if it were a gift I never asked for. Before we dive deeper into this story of betrayal and ultimate revenge, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to truefamilyrevengestries, because this tale proves that sometimes the best revenge is simply being the better person. At first, I didn't understand. The smile on his face didn't match the weight of the papers. Isabella and Mateo were playing in the backyard of our small suburban home in Seattle, unaware that our lives were about to twist into something I could hardly imagine. He didn't say much. He just handed them over, as if offering congratulations. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Custody papers. Requests for temporary guardianship of my own children. The first time I read the words, a part of me froze. The man I had called family for years, the man who had been a mentor, a friend, and a father figure to my wife's side, was suddenly the architect of a plan that could dismantle everything I had built. He had always worn the suit of propriety, the tie of social expectation, but behind those eyes I now saw the glint of something far colder. Pride, ego, a determination to control rather than protect. "Robert," he said, voice silky but sharp, "I only want what's best for the children." The problem was his idea of what was best wasn't reality. It never had been. And if I thought for even a second that I would cower, I was wrong. I had learned over the years what it meant to be present, to be consistent, to show up when it mattered, to love them fiercely, even in the small moments nobody else noticed. I remember sitting at the kitchen table that night, the papers spread out in front of me like an ambush. Isabella and Mateo had just gone to bed. The house was quiet, but my mind was a storm. I thought of my wife, Camila, who had passed 2 years earlier after a long illness, and the space her absence left. I thought of the nights I had stayed awake, consoling the children, reading stories, and holding them while the world outside seemed indifferent. And I realized something essential. The fight was not just about custody. It was about respect. It was about recognition. It was about finally showing that love cannot be quantified by titles, wealth, or social standing. Over the next few days, I watched him maneuver subtly, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of neighbors, colleagues, and even some family members. But I had allies too, friends who knew the truth, and Sophia, my niece, who had witnessed enough to understand what mattered. She reached out quietly, offering support and insight, her loyalty unwavering despite the risks. "They'll see the truth," she told me. "We just have to make sure it's undeniable." The next court date arrived like a storm I could feel in my chest. Reynolds, his lawyer, paced the floor with that smug, rehearsed confidence. Judge Hawthorne, who presided over family matters in Seattle, had a reputation for fairness, but little patience for theatrics. I sat with Isabella and Mateo at my side, holding their hands, feeling their trust anchor me. When Sophia stood to speak, it was as if the room itself paused. Small but unflinching, she described the care I had given, the nights I had stayed awake, the sacrifices that had gone unnoticed. Reynolds tried to interrupt, but the judge silenced him with a single raised hand. Sophia's voice carried the truth into every corner of the courtroom, a truth that no amount of wealth or influence could obscure. I watched my children's faces, feeling a surge of pride and relief. And in that moment, I knew this was not about revenge, not yet. It was about preserving what truly mattered, about ensuring that the foundation we had built would not be shaken by arrogance disguised as concern. Outside, as we walked through the courthouse doors, the chill of the Seattle air felt like a cleansing. Reporters flashed cameras, and I offered a simple truth to anyone listening. I'm grateful my children were seen for who they are, not for the titles or the money that others believed define worth. Isabella and Mateo squeezed my hands, and I knew they understood. This was just the beginning. The papers in my father-in-law's hands had been meant as a weapon, but I had plans that he could never imagine. Plans that would turn pride into its own undoing, quietly, efficiently, and unmistakably. The mountains outside Seattle's skyline seemed distant, yet symbolic. They were steadfast, like us, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to breathe. The weeks after the court hearing were a strange blend of relief and quiet tension. The custody papers my father-in-law had gifted me no longer carried the same weight. They had been disarmed by truth and persistence. But make no mistake, the man who had orchestrated the entire ordeal, Daniel Torres, was not defeated in spirit. He was patient, calculating, and prideful in a way that could be dangerous if left unchecked. Isabella thrived in this newfound stability. I watched her curl over her books in the evenings, her focus unbroken, her determination palpable. She spent nights typing essays on her laptop for scholarships, the glow of the screen highlighting her growing confidence. When acceptance letters began arriving, she would sprint to my side, handing them to me as if I had somehow engineered the outcome. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. "We did it." Her joy was contagious, spreading through the house and filling the corners that had long felt hollow. Mateo flourished too. His soccer coach, a stocky man named Jim Barlow, had taken notice of his raw talent. "He's got heart," Jim had said after practice one afternoon, "and with the right guidance, he'll go far." I smiled because it wasn't about the trophies or accolades. It was about Mateo learning to believe in himself. And in watching him, I saw the reflection of what our family had fought so hard to preserve: hope. Meanwhile, Daniel Torres began feeling the fallout from his actions in ways even he hadn't anticipated. At his country club, where invitations had once been a symbol of status, he was suddenly met with cold shoulders and clipped politeness. People who had once admired him for his influence now saw him as something else entirely: a man who let pride dictate morality. His wealth, which he had wielded like armor, now offered no protection from the consequences of his arrogance. Judge Hawthorne's ruling had quietly nudged him toward self-reflection. Her words were deliberate, precise. "Mr. Daniel, perhaps time spent at the Family Support Center would offer perspective rather than punishment." He resisted at first, as if humility were a language he had never learned, but slowly, subtly, he began to change. At the center, Daniel witnessed the struggles of families like ours. Parents juggling multiple jobs, children clinging to adults who society deemed insufficient. He saw mothers exhausted from 2 shifts yet still reading bedtime stories, fathers returning home late yet offering guidance and warmth. Something inside him began to fracture, the hardened shell of ego giving way to glimpses of remorse. Elena, his daughter and my former sister-in-law, transformed too. She began volunteering at the center, counseling families torn apart by custody disputes. Speaking openly about the danger of letting pride masquerade as love, she became a quiet force for redemption. It wasn't grand gestures that defined change, but consistency, presence, and the courage to face one's own Daniel Torres. Our daily life settled into rhythms that felt almost ordinary. Morning drives to soccer practice, late-night talks over tea, laughter that didn't feel like survival but like living. For the first time since Camila's illness, I woke up without bracing for disaster. The home felt alive again, infused with the kind of warmth that no courtroom or document could dictate. Yet, even in moments of calm, I knew the storm wasn't entirely behind us. Richard Hale, for all his changes, remained a man shaped by pride. And as much as I focused on preserving the fragile equilibrium we had regained, I kept a quiet awareness that the true reckoning, one that balanced justice, patience, and presence, was still unfolding, waiting for the right moment to assert itself. And that moment, as I would soon discover, was closer than I had imagined. The weeks passed in a rhythm that felt deceptively calm. My name is Daniel Torres, and I have learned that the most powerful moments often arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary days. Isabella's scholarship success and Mateo's athletic progress created a bubble of stability, but beneath it, the memory of Daniel Torres' betrayal lingered like a shadow. I had forgiven, but I had not forgotten, and I intended to make sure he understood the weight of his choices, in his own time, in his own setting. The opportunity came sooner than I anticipated. Daniel announced a lavish autumn gathering at his newly renovated Seattle penthouse, a display of wealth and status, of everything he believed made him untouchable. Invitations had been sent far and wide, and the event was the perfect stage for the kind of reckoning I had envisioned. Not through aggression, not through confrontation, but through subtle, undeniable proof of our triumph over his manipulations. Isabella, sensing my apprehension, offered a reassuring smile. "Dad," she said, "it's our chance to show that we're stronger together." Mateo, oblivious to the weight of history but attuned to my mood, bounced around the living room with infectious energy, insisting on rehearsing the little speech I had prepared in case I needed to speak. Their confidence gave me courage, a reminder that the best kind of revenge doesn't humiliate, it enlightens. The night of the party arrived, and the penthouse sparkled with the kind of opulence only a man like Daniel Torres could afford. Chandeliers dripped crystal light over polished floors, and the scent of expensive flowers mingled with gourmet hors d'oeuvres. Guests in designer were moved through the space, unaware of the storm beneath the surface of civility. Daniel greeted me with his usual mixture of charm and guarded suspicion. "Robert," he said, voice smooth, "I'm glad you could make it. The children are welcome, of course." He didn't notice the calculated calm in my nod, nor the quiet anticipation in Isabella's eyes, nor the barely contained excitement in Mateo's grin. As the evening unfolded, I allowed him to bask in the illusion of control. He spoke at length about investments, about philanthropy, about the subtle ways he believed he had shaped our lives. I listened, nodding politely, and let the children move among the guests with a confidence Richard could not have predicted. Isabella, dressed elegantly but with no pretension, mingled with adults with poise, and Mateo, playful and charming, won the attention of everyone in the room. And then came the moment I had been preparing for, the announcement. I asked the room for a few moments of attention under the guise of a casual toast. Danny's smile faltered just enough to reveal curiosity and perhaps a flicker of apprehension. Isabella stepped forward, holding the folder that contained her scholarship essay and the letters of acceptance. Mateo stood beside her, clutching a small binder filled with his athletic achievements and personal notes about the journey we had endured as a family. "I want to share something with you all," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This is a story of perseverance, of truth, and of understanding what it really means to protect those we love." I gestured to Isabella and Mateo. "These are the fruits of patience, of courage, and of being present when it mattered most." Every line in this essay, every goal scored, every moment of growth was made possible not by wealth or status, but by love, attention, and the refusal to be broken by betrayal. The room went quiet. Danny's eyes widened slightly, his pride momentarily disarmed. Isabella began reading aloud, her voice steady, her words carrying the weight of everything we had endured. Mateo presented his achievements with infectious enthusiasm, highlighting not just victories, but lessons learned, obstacles overcome, and the resilience of a family that refused to be defined by another's selfishness. And there it was, the subtle, undeniable revenge. A display of triumph that money could never buy, lessons he could never teach, and dignity he could never take. Danny Torres, for all his power and influence, could only watch as the room shifted its focus not on him, not on his wealth, but on the strength, perseverance, and love that had flourished despite his interference. The applause that followed was sincere, not out of obligation, but from recognition. Recognition of a family that had endured, healed, and emerged stronger than anyone could have predicted. Danny stood frozen for a moment, absorbing the lesson he had long refused to learn. That true legacy is measured not by dominance or pride, but by care, presence, and unwavering support. In that instant, I realized something vital. Revenge is most powerful when it doesn't humiliate, but when it reveals the truth, when it allows the betrayed to shine so brightly that the betrayal itself becomes meaningless. And as the room clapped, Isabella and Mateo by my side, I understood that the tide had turned. But as powerful as this moment felt, the story was not yet over. Redemption, recognition, and reconciliation were still within reach. Not just for Daniel, but for those around him who had been caught in the ripple of his pride. And it was in that realization that I began to prepare for the final part of our journey. The closure that would cement the lessons learned and ensure that our family's peace was unshakable. The days after the party were quiet, but charged with reflection. My name is Robert Castillo, and I have come to realize that true power lies not in wealth, not in dominance, but in the resilience of family and the strength to forgive not for them, but for ourselves. Isabella and Mateo thrived, their confidence and joy radiating in ways money and status never could. But the story wasn't just about their victories. It was about the transformation of those who had once caused pain. Danny Torres, for all his pride, began to shift in ways subtle yet profound. At first, he avoided eye contact, uncomfortable in the presence of the family he had tried to manipulate. But over time, he sought advice not financial, not legal, but personal. He asked how Isabella had grown so poised under pressure. He marveled at Mateo's athletic resilience. And slowly, he began to volunteer, quietly, at the community center that had supported so many families, including ours. I watched with cautious optimism as he engaged with others who had faced challenges he had never imagined. Mothers balancing work and childcare, fathers struggling to make ends meet while remaining present in their children's lives. All became mirrors for him to see the consequences of his pride and the possibilities of humility. I didn't interfere. I allowed the lessons to sink in at their own pace, knowing that true change cannot be forced. Isabella, ever perceptive, noticed the subtle shifts. "Dad," she said one evening, "he's starting to understand. Not fully, but he's trying." Matteo, too, noticed, and they both reminded me of why we had endured, why standing together mattered more than vengeance. And then came the final test. Danny asked if he could host a small community event at the very same Seattle penthouse, inviting families who had experienced custody battles, betrayals, and struggles similar to ours. He wanted to speak, not to boast, but to acknowledge mistakes. I hesitated, remembering the years of conflict, but Isabella and Matteo's steady presence reminded me of a lesson Maria had always taught. Presence matters more than pride. The night of the event, I watched from the back of the room as Danny Torres approached the podium. His voice trembled at first, but it carried sincerity. "I used to believe wealth could solve everything," he said. "That money could replace love, that status could replace presence. I was wrong. I hurt people I loved. I let pride guide my decisions, and I tried to control what was never mine to control. Tonight, I am here to acknowledge those mistakes, to apologize, and to learn from all of you." The room was quiet, not empty, but full of understanding, of shared pain, and of hope. Applause followed, steady and heartfelt. Isabella squeezed my hand. Matteo leaned against me, whispering, "He finally sees it, Dad." And I nodded, recognizing that true revenge had never been about humiliation. It had been about showing that love, presence, and family cannot be broken by greed or pride. Weeks passed, and life continued with a renewed sense of balance. Isabella received a full scholarship to her dream university, her essays and accomplishments celebrated not only by her school, but by the community that had watched her journey. Matteo's team made it to the regional finals, his joy infectious, his confidence unshakable. And for me, the quiet satisfaction of being present, of showing up for the moments that mattered, was a victory greater than any courtroom or confrontation could ever provide. Danny Torres remained a changed man, not perfect, but present. He contributed to the community, sought guidance from those he had once dismissed, and gradually earned a place of trust through consistent effort. And through it all, I realized that our story, the story of betrayal, of endurance, of quiet revenge, and of ultimate redemption, was not about victory over him, but victory over fear, doubt, and the limitations imposed by pride. As I sat on the porch one evening, Isabella and Matteo by my side, watching the Seattle skyline glow beneath the stars, I understood something profound. True family revenge exists not to destroy, but to illuminate, to prove that even after the deepest betrayals, love, patience, and presence can prevail. If this story of resilience, family triumph, and subtle revenge inspired you, make sure to subscribe to truefamilyrevengestries, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us whether you're Team Robert or Team Danny, and share your own family revenge stories. Who knows? Your story might just be featured in our next video.